The upside to the pandemic is in the air. It's cleaner, there's less pollution because we're flying less, driving less, and industry has slowed to almost a halt. Greenhouse gas emissions plunged in April by about 17% overall. In some countries, the drop was more like 40%. That is great news, and it feels like nature is rebalancing a bit. Though, as Jeff Semple explains, it's just a blip in the big picture of climate change.
Paul Koch woke up one morning last month to find a trespasser taking a dip.
So I called my wife and said, "There's a moose in the pool."
The 800-pounder made quite a splash for several hours before making her own way out of the backyard. Koch and his wife have lived in this suburban Ottawa neighborhood for 40 years, but this was a first.
We've had lots of pool parties over the years, but not one with a moose or any animal.
With humans living in lockdown, the animal kingdom is reclaiming some territory. In Thailand, these monkeys are going ape, embroiled in a street fight over food in the center of town.
I don't know.
Wild turkeys are strolling the suburbs of Louisiana. Even penguins have been spotted jaywalking in South Africa. The list of unusual wildlife sightings goes on and on and on. This cartoon pretty much sums up the sentiment.
Even here on the campus of the University of Toronto Scarborough, when I bike in, I routinely see deer now in campus. The major inhibitor of the movement of animals across the city is traffic, will be busy roads. And now we've seen major roads, major arteries in the city being almost devoid of cars.
This spring, traffic volumes in Toronto were cut in half. And those silent streets are also providing a breath of fresh air. Smoggy skylines from some of the world's most polluted places are clearing. The contrast is even starker from space, revealing nitrogen dioxide emissions in China and Italy before and after the lockdown. In India, particle pollution fell by nearly 60%.
We are seeing improvements here in North America as well.
During the pandemic's peak, Canada's largest cities saw air pollution levels, highlighted here in blue, drop by 15%.
I would suspect that we could probably see a 40–50% reduction in the number of smoggy days.
Pollution kills 7 million people every year, according to the World Health Organization. And some experts expect that this cleaner air might actually save more lives this year than are lost to the virus. And that plummeting pollution is also sparking a debate over whether the pandemic might be flattening the climate curve. 2020 is witnessing a carbon crash. CO2 emissions, which fuel climate change, are taking a nosedive, unlike anything we've seen before.
The reduction in terms of tons of CO2, which is what really matters for the atmosphere, we're definitely going to have by far the biggest reduction ever.
The good news, even as economies reopen, carbon emissions are expected to end the year down around 8%, the equivalent of India's entire energy use. Which brings us to the bad news.
Even if we get an 8% reduction this year, that's the sort of magnitude of reduction we would need this year, next year, the year after, and every single year in order to limit warming to 1.5 degrees.
To meet the Paris summit goal and prevent the worst of climate change, global emissions need to fall by 7.6% every year for a decade. Even this unprecedented lockdown amounts to little more than a first step.
Basically, we need this kind of reduction every year. And we don't want to have a pandemic to do that. We don't want to have an economic recession to do that. And so we're going to need to make relatively large changes.
And some believe this moment represents our best chance for that change, a golden opportunity to go green.
We all get up every morning, we get into our cars, we drive, we go to meetings all over the world and everywhere all the time. And now we've learned, I think we can do these things a lot better.
Jatin Nathwani's office offers a glimpse into a sustainable future. A zero-carbon building, one of Canada's first, with a solar-paneled roof and geothermal heating. The University of Waterloo professor believes this economic crisis offers a chance to invest in these technologies. He points to the last time carbon emissions dropped, following the global recession in 2009. Governments then responded by pumping billions into stimulus projects, construction designed to boost the economy. But that also saw a sharp spike in emissions.
There wasn't anything green about it because there's typically not much green about, expanding a road or building a bridge or putting a new roof on the community rink.
But this time round, many countries are eyeing a so-called green recovery. The European Union is making climate change the centerpiece of its trillion-dollar investment, a stimulus package steering away from fossil fuels and towards energy-efficient projects. France is offering financial aid to beleaguered airlines, but only in exchange for investments in lower-emission aircraft. Even China, the world's largest emitter, has endorsed big spending on a slew of low-carbon infrastructure, albeit while still building new coal plants.
I believe that this is going to be different and will be different, partly because the recognition, the notion that we are really facing a very severe climate change question is no longer a matter of debate.
The United States may prove the exception as the White House steadily slashes green protections. But what about Canada? So far, the federal government has pledged $1.7 billion to clean up orphaned and abandoned oil and gas wells in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and BC, salvaging thousands of jobs.
If we can put some of the people who were displaced out of the oil patch back to work into the cleanup process, then that actually is helping in that labor market.
Canada's oil sector was already reeling before the pandemic pushed gas prices down another 20%. Analysts predict demand for oil may take years to fully recover.
I think we're seeing a transformation here that is quite fundamental, that decouples our dependence on oil and fossil fuels.
He argues this pandemic presents an opportunity to fast-track the transition to renewable energy.
We should aim for an orderly phase-out, an orderly transition to efficiency electric vehicles, rather than trying to prop up and maintain an industry that has no long-term future. The government is being offered an opportunity on a golden platter, but I'm not too confident that they will take that opportunity.
Political will to push drastic change can be hard to come by in normal times, but this is anything but. The pandemic has seen millions heed the advice of experts to protect against an invisible threat.
The Canadian public has listened. We've stayed home. We physically distance. We are listening to medical experts and their advice to keep us safe. Now we need to do the same thing when it comes to climate change.
To protect the future not only for ourselves, but also our furry friends.